So, 2023. Not great, am I right? We all have our own reasons, be they personal, political, or just not caring for the weather. But in any event, I think we can all agree that 2024 hopefully holds better days. Fortunately, those last 365 days still had some pretty darn good movies to tide us over. I didn't get around to seeing some big names like Past Lives or Killers of the Flower Moon, but here's my quick thoughts on 10 pictures that left me especially impressed, be it for visuals, story, and or just sheer fun. This is my top films of 2023. In the autumn of his career, a celebrated actor is presented with two reliable options: inoffensive dramas or vengeful action movies. But leave it to the man, the myth, the father having a much better year at the cinemas than his son, Denzel Washington, to thread the needle with The Equalizer 3. I already set my watch for some well-timed takes on director Antoine Fuqua's latest closer to its release, but I'm happy to reiterate that what this trilogy capper may lack in suspense and character development compared to its predecessors, it makes up for with scope and style. Italy's gorgeous Amalfi Coast is on full display, a backdrop to both tranquil strolls to the grocer and ruthless executions of the mafia goons who dare step to our hero, and Denzel remains an incomparably smooth operator in the three-letter agency sense. Toss in rapturous cinematography, a hair-raising score, and a subtle Man on Fire reunion with co-star Dakota Fanning, and what could otherwise be a generic mob war flick becomes the most wonderfully violent inspiration for a Euro trip that you've ever seen. 2023 was a pretty inglorious year for superhero movies. The Flash cast a notorious criminal to gawk at a gallery of reheated DC leftovers. The Marvels was the titular studio's worst performing entry ever, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania proved that not even Paul Rudd's charm can salvage a movie where this happens.
My name is Darren, and I am not dead!
Which makes it all the more of a blessing that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 ended up being such a thrilling, funny, and tear-jerking experience. As with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, what a pleasure it is to have a horror comedy maverick helm one of these flicks, and with a blessed focus on its titular crew alone. Writer-director James Gunn was on a shorter studio leash here than with the Suicide Squad, sure, but he still manages to skillfully mix crude humor, moderate gore, and clever sci-fi imagery which runs the gamut from icky to existentially horrifying. Also, leave it to Gunn to drop the franchise's first F-bomb not in a moment of extreme triumph or sorrow, but rather with a squabble about how to open a car door. The soundtrack is outstanding as well. With the 90s finally being fair game, I can at last see myself represented on screen by characters sulking to Radiohead's Creep and Do You Realize by the Flaming Lips. Fool that I am for faux single-take fights, I also delighted in the hallway brawl set to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. The cast is a ton of fun as well. Making Rocket the focus was an inspired choice, and I simply could not maintain a dry eye anytime he and his lab rat pals were on screen. Nathan Fillion puts in a welcome cameo, Cosmo is a very good dog indeed, and Will Poulter amuses as 24-karat himbo Adam Warlock. I feel like Elizabeth Debicki could have used more screen time, but then I could also just watch the actress do her taxes for 2 hours and still feel shortchanged. Fortunately, there's plenty of the High Evolutionary, as Chukwudi Iwuji plays the villain with an electrifying combo of dictatorial precision and shrieking petulance. Some interesting characters do get sidelined, and the severed relationship between Star-Lord and Gamora at the plot's ostensible core didn't hit as hard as I gathered it ought to post-Endgame. Still, grayish CGI monster battle at the climax notwithstanding, this was a marked improvement over most post-Thanos Marvel media. Here's hoping that the inevitable Volume 4 is a mix well worth popping into the old Walkman. Or, sorry, the Zune. For all their awards season ambitions, and The Irishman notwithstanding, Netflix has proven themselves less adept at producing prestige dramas than at hosting a home for schlocky action movies. Some are a generic burden on the eyes and ears, some are thrilling yet disjointed, and some concern Chris Hemsworth breaking a guy's arm with the nearest available object. I like the first Extraction more in concept than execution, but franchise extender Extraction 2 is a B-movie sequel in all the right ways. The same violent thrills, only bigger, louder, and more confident. The plot and dialogue may be a veritable checklist of cliches, but Hemsworth, unshackled from the irreverent, kid-friendly confines of Thor, is a badass for the ages as Aussie private operator Tyler Rake, while the flick takes all the right cues from The Raid and its peers, foregrounding memorable, bone-crunching brawls that are at once intricately choreographed and believably chaotic. Indeed, in a year where professional lunatic Tom Cruise rode a motorcycle and a train off a cliff, The hardest action sequence of 2023 was still buried midway through this direct-to-streaming joint. Only time will tell when the implicitly Idris Elba-centric Extraction 3 will hit Netflix, but I'll be there. In the meantime, though, I really gotta cancel my subscription again. I mean, there's nothing on there. Who knows when Stranger Things 5 will actually come out? In 2009, a strange picture started making the rounds online, one comprised of an unnerving, police sketch-looking drawing of a face, and a single question. Ever dreamed this man? For years, there was talk about this image, this proto-meme, either being adapted into a film or having always been premature viral marketing for one. And thanks to the distributors of all things wistfully unnerving, A24, we sorta kinda finally got it in 2023. Dream Scenario, a focused yet unpredictable tragicomic fantasy starring Nicolas Cage as a dorky science professor who goes viral when random people start seeing him in their dreams just hanging out. Soon enough, the parallels move from subtext to text. Here is a tale about internet fame, and soon enough, cancellation of a male teacher no less, in a context where the inciting incident is abstracted out to the realm of pure magic. Indeed, if you became a household name without really doing anything, how would you find out and how would you respond? It's a clever, timely conceit, albeit one which often belabors its allegory with asides for trendy references, trauma, nods to right-wing personalities, and homages that don't even track with the plot. Why would someone paint loser on the guy's car if they'd become viscerally afraid of him? Fortunately, this is a premise which provides for my choice blend of vibes. A little humor, a little horror, some last-minute Black Mirror-adjacent science fiction, and an earnest dramatic core. The dream sequences are appropriately surreal and unnerving, but never too bombastic, and intermittent, choppy, near-subliminal scene edits aptly depict how these strange events occupy the minds of both our hero and his loved ones. Tim Meadows and Dylan Baker entertain as foils to Cage's anxious, indignant character, and I was pleasantly surprised to see Michael Cera pop up as an insincere ad guru. It's just a clever, colorful story about an ordinary man thrust into the spotlight by inexplicable means, and one in which I saw a lot to relate to, from mystification with the fickle terms of modern celebrity status to frustration with your identity growing tied to something imposed on you instead of your own ambitions. And hey, we've all got Nicolas Cage on the brain already from time to time, right? In an age where theater-going can feel bound for extinction, Barbenheimer turned an amusing release schedule overlap into a bona fide social phenomenon. And yet, I sat out the first half of that double feature for most of 2023 because, well, at face value, there's just not a lot to draw me in. I'm not thrilled about films based on toys becoming a thing again, and I've kind of gotten my fill of metafictional Warner Bros. Content. And yet, far from a green screen heavy multiverse dreck inundating many a modern franchise, director-co-writer Greta Gerwig downright resurrected classic Hollywood in Barbie. A kaleidoscopic cash grab, yes, but also an unapologetically forward-thinking fantasy adventure. The sets and costumes of girl power utopia Barbieland are an eye-popping delight. I desperately need those Dayglow rollerblades. The score is overflowing with pop bops, including, yes, a certain Aqua track, and there's even a couple of choreographed musical numbers. As for the cast, everyone is game. Margot Robbie as the titular doll, stereotypical Barbie to be precise, struggling to reconcile creeping existential dread with her gorgeous chipper persona. Ryan Gosling as Ken, an insecure himbo whose unwitting discovery of patriarchy sparks a kinsurrection among like-named peers. Kate McKinnon doing her thing as Weird Barbie, and Michael Cera as fussy loner Alan are just a few among many standouts. Also, failed consumer goods trivia junkie that I am, Earring Magic Ken's appearance was my metaphorical stand-up and clap moment. As for that script, it's a lot. The magical logic of Barbieland makes only as much sense as it needs to, and the fourth wall breaks or mixed media interludes drop by at a healthy enough rate to be amusing but not burdensome. I live for openings as unhinged as a 2001 A Space Odyssey parody where a bunch of little girls are playing with baby dolls in a primeval desert. But while Will Ferrell is hilarious as the CEO of Mattel, he and his lackeys' slapstick antics serve to diminish the contrast of the real world. Meanwhile, the dialogue hangs its hat on intermittent diatribes about feminism that, while arguably astute, often kneecap the pace of a scene to basically just shout a Tumblr post at you, even where it might underline how our protagonist's naivete fluctuates based on what would just make a good zinger. Take a look at any given frame of this film, though, and it should be evident that subtlety is not on the menu, nor need it be. In that spirit, for what it wants to accomplish, Barbie reaches an artistic level that brand-name mainstream blockbusters simply rarely do anymore. Having come out swinging with Hereditary and further established his style with Midsommar, writer-director Ari Aster is no stranger to grief, familial strife, and generational trauma, themes that have made him a vanguard of A24 movies both as an objective and an aesthetic category. I've seen both films, and yet before 2023, I'd never seen anything quite like Beau is Afraid. An unhinged, cruel, yet hilarious psychosexual odyssey. A borderline Greek tragedy that's at once Kafkaesque and Kaufman-esque. A timid, bloated Joaquin Phoenix plays the titular schlub, who weathers setback after illogical setback on the way to see his overbearing mother one last time. Nathan Lane is a pill-happy doctor who takes an injured Beau under his wing, and Stephen McKinley Henderson is a suspicious therapist. I have a fine relationship with my mom, so whether this script was intensely personal to Aster or not, my condolences if so, I felt more sympathy than empathy as our hero descended into a surreal spiral of guilt, self-pity, and low-key Oedipal frustration. Consider me glued to the screen when the dialogue got going, but at nearly 3 hours long, a few breaks for a breather were needed. Typically, I prefer stories to have at least one foot on solid earth at some point, but asking when Beau leaves reality would be like asking the same of the protagonists in David Lynch's Eraserhead or Darren Aronofsky's Mother. This is just a tale set in a nightmarish world where everyone is out to get you personally, and there is no hope or rest. In that spirit, I did find catharsis in seeing various anxious thoughts made manifest, whether concerning health, if you don't take that pill exactly according to the label, you will die. Security, if you leave your door open for even a second, someone will steal your keys and crazy homeless people will invade your apartment. Or even love, Parker Posey will eventually sleep with you. Yet there's dark comedy too. As ever, humor and horror are two sides of the same coin, and I found a gentle contrast to Phoenix's Joker in how, as bodies fill the streets and a naked serial killer named the Birthday Boy Stab Man runs rampant, it's not a somber rebuke of American cities, but rather a cartoonish foil to a sad fool. The centerpiece of the film is a scene where Beau enters a traveling theater troupe's performance, the set blurring into the stage, blurring into a poetic, mixed media metafiction. If Jacob's Ladder had a laugh, if Synecdoche, New York had mommy issues, it would ring out like this. That, and it's safe to say, a directorial trademark has been established. If it's shot by Aster, a head's getting shattered. I'm not typically a sports movie guy. There's no better microcosm of my particular flavor of masculinity than the fact that I've seen every Rambo, but never watched more than one Rocky. Yet when that latter series got a second wind with Creed, I started tuning in. Maybe it was the Expendables getting me needlessly invested in elderly Sly Stallone projects. Maybe it was Michael B. Jordan in the lead, bringing youthful energy to a franchise that's become shorthand for beating a dead horse since before I was even born. Maybe it's the fact that I just really like the sound of Tessa Thompson's voice. In any event, after a decent middle piece, Creed 3 was an outstanding boxing drama and the rare threequel, let alone to a legacy sequel, that arguably surpasses its predecessors. It's high marks across the board here. Jordan, in his directorial debut, takes full advantage of IMAX cameras and his nerd credentials to stage matches that feel expansive, impactful, and often implicitly or openly evocative of an anime showdown. Especially in the final fight, where choir sings as the audience fades into darkness for best frenemies face-off. In front of the camera, Jordan puts on a career-high performance as the titular world champion, whose retirement is called into question when he lends a hand to a childhood friend with a grudge, Damian Anderson. But it's Jonathan Majors as Dame who steals the show. Gracious yet bitter, desperate yet megalomaniacal, he's as layered a villain as I've seen in recent memory. A performance which ages all too well in light of the actor's since-developed criminal record. While some time since the previous Creeds left me a tad lost in recalling his family tree, plenty is done to make you laugh or weep along with Adonis as he struggles to balance his empire with his responsibilities to both friends and loved ones. The sets and costumes are appropriately flashy too, and the score is an apt mix of propulsive rap tracks and orchestral bravado. No Rocky theme this time, but as Stallone is absent save for a co-producer seat, it's only fair. Wherever the series goes from here, presumably Majors free, at least this picture had me ready to stand up and cheer at times. And what more can one ask of a blockbuster? Almost a decade after the first film's release, where tales of vengeful hitters dicing up hordes of baddies in colorful locales now flourish, it's hard to imagine the action movie landscape without John Wick. What was originally going to be called Scorn and go straight to video, instead became a spiritual successor to the Matrix trilogy, an increasingly heightened yet proudly grounded homage to kung fu classics, slapstick comedy, and the endearing pleasure of seeing Keanu Reeves shoot a guy in the head. Some may deride the series for losing track of its roots, and yet, for my gold coins, John Wick Chapter 4 was some of the most fun I've had all year. Don't get me wrong, the structure of this whole assassin underworld is as coherent as Derules from The Fairly OddParents, and Wick walks away from some tumbles that had put Wile E. Coyote in the hospital. But how can you not love this supporting cast? We've got Bill Skarsgård in a three-piece suit. We got Scott Adkins in a Nutty Professor suit. We got Donnie Yen as a murderous Mr. Magoo. We got Clancy Brown. And you'd better believe there's a new doggy companion to keep the spirit of canine vengeance alive. Every fight scene, too, is a unique, meticulously structured event, whether it's a nunchaku-centric tussle or a shootout amid Parisian traffic. And the top-down sequence in an abandoned mansion was a delightful admission that, yeah, this all might as well be a video game, and that's awesome. There's talk of a 5th entry down the line, and I guess someone is watching that Peacock prequel about the Continental, but Chapter 4 makes for such an energetic yet wistful finale, all the more so given Karan actor Lance Reddick's tragic passing, but I can't imagine another wick being able to burn any brighter. The filmography of Yorgos Lanthimos is historically defined by somber, pallid, and surrealistically sedate drama. The Lobster lampoons dating in adulthood with a world where being single was a crime punishable by transfiguration. Killing of a sacred deer translates an ancient Greek tragedy into a cautionary tale about getting on Barry Keoghan's bad side. And, actually those are the only two I've ever seen. But then came Poor Things, a florid, rapturous fantasy story that never ceases to take one's breath away, whether by laughter, awe-inspiring vistas, or outrageous irreverence. This time around, the director funnels his flair for the fantastical into an adaptation which is lighthearted, colorful, and replete with out-there performances from a gallery of big actors. Emma Stone makes for a wonderfully unpredictable heroine, a naive wanderer who, despite her robotic mannerisms and problematic origins, quickly comes off as the most confident person in any room. Willem Dafoe is a joy as her literally and figuratively twisted mad scientist father, as is Mark Ruffalo, a dandy whose cocky exterior is but a thin veil over a deep well of petty, smothering dickishness. Lanthimos shoots his players in ways I've simply never seen in a movie of this magnitude, utilizing pinhole and fisheye lenses to enhance the world's off-kilter atmosphere. And what a world it is, as this is a globe-trotting tale like few others. The sets for London, Lisbon, Paris, and beyond are constructed like dreamy dioramas, grounded landmarks and architecture smushed up against quietly heightened constructs, all backlit by heavenly aurorae. Costumes are no less lavish, with shoulder ruffles for days and a rainbow's worth of fashions that had me pining for its ambiguously turn of a 1900s setting. To top it all off, the score is an eerie pleasure, a fitting complement to our protagonist's whimsical yet dark adventures. Indeed, whether it's the invariably hilarious cursing or the sheer amount of screen time spent on Stone's character getting laid, furious jumping, excuse me, this is the rare film that I'll praise so highly yet under no circumstances recommend that anybody watch with their parents. The journey of discovery, both about the self and the foibles of humanity, through which the script takes us, may be familiar, but you've never seen it belted out quite like this. It's an uncanny feminist spin on Frankenstein, the coveted picture which contains both animal hybrid experiments and unapologetic self-gratification. It's creepy, it's funny, it's horny, it's kind of magical, and Margaret Qualley pops by for a minute. What else can he ask for? You don't have to like Christopher Nolan. Hell, there's plenty of reasons not to, from his allergy to gradual scene transitions to his penchant for lofty yet awkward dialogue, which you usually can't hear anyway. But I think you do have to respect the man, rising as he did from the clever, suspenseful Memento and Insomnia to helm the revival of Batman, and arguably superhero movies as a whole, which in turn allowed him to be one of the few directors permitted to make original blockbusters anymore. After years of spectacle-driven genre fare, then, Nolan helming a 3-hour historical biopic could come off as a hard pivot. And yet Oppenheimer proved a titanic, foreboding picture, one which excels at granting cinematic appeal to the story of the world's most infamous physicist. The writer-director's fingerprints are everywhere, most notably an enthralling sense of scale, courtesy of returning DP Hoyt van Hoytema. Tenet composer Ludwig Göransson returns too, providing an elegiac, subtly electronic score which strikes an ideal balance of peace and pandemonium in evoking the birth of the atomic age. Also, far from abandoning his sci-fi chops, Nolan throws in some imagery that's not only heightened, but downright horrifying. The build-up to the Trinity test had me covering my face more than most slashers, and there's some definite Jacob's Ladder DNA in the moments where a rattled Oppenheimer imagines the walls vibrating or trampling a charred corpse amidst V-Day celebrations. It's the cast, though, which deserves the most accolades. I usually like to shout out every notable player for a review, but here, there's simply too many. Still, standouts include Robert Downey Jr., finally out of the Iron Man suit, as an embittered politician, Matt Damon as an impatient military man, and Dane DeHaan keeping up a hot streak playing contemptible twerps. At the risk of stating the obvious, though, it's Cillian Murphy who deserves Oscar nods, as Oppie, the actor slides between exhausted, joyful, ashamed, and existentially haunted, all without dipping into the melodramatic shouting or weeping endemic to many comparable character studies. Indeed, for once, Nolan's penchant for jumbled timelines clarifies instead of confounds. With the social network-esque framing device of being interrogated by agency suits, it stands to reason that our protagonist would jump all over the place when recalling events. I don't have entirely unvarnished praise for Nolan's excesses. The celebrity parade does eventually feel a tad overwhelming, or at least like not everyone gets a fair go at Nolan's punchy, blink and you'll miss critical exposition script. Could no one spare a few more lines for Academy Award nominee Rami Malek? The inclusion of Albert Einstein and other notable scientists, while presumably historically plausible, also came off like an even nerdier version of MCU cameos at times. That, and it's not that I don't bless Nolan for whipping out the R rating to get Florence Pugh naked, but making Oppenheimer say the line during a sex scene feels like a meme that somehow manifested in reality. Going in, too, I knew this wouldn't be an action movie, but I also didn't expect it to turn into a Red Scare adjacent legal thriller. Nolan's dialogue is swift enough, though, the aforementioned performance is strong enough, that these developments never felt boring. You can criticize the film for not showing more explosions, either to center a Japanese perspective or for sheer thrills, but I think that'd be missing the point. The omission is no accident, because this isn't a war film. To me, it's a film about how brilliant people, driven by fear, curiosity, ambition, and or love, came together to create arguably the worst thing ever made, and how we're all still staring at the ripples of the world that followed. And that's blessedly a wrap on that turkey of a tour around the sun. I don't know much about the future, but I do know that there'll be many more opportunities to come. Opportunities to enjoy some great films, yes, be they long-awaited blockbusters or indie darlings doing the festival circuit, but also to put the popcorn down and write your own script, literally or figuratively. We live in more tumultuous times now than ever, it can often seem, and yet as I always try to remind myself, life can still make sense if you don't force it to. I'm looking forward to 2024 being my most sensible year yet. How about you?